Meta released some really big news yesterday, obviously, with what's happening on their device. And I think it's going to affect a lot within not only the crypto space, but around the whole aspect of NFTs and how this might play out. The real question is, how will games start to migrate, possibly maybe into the Meta platform and others? We also might see a lot more in the way of just innovation as we see VR and AR really develop. So they did drop a lot. We'll break all that down for you guys today. You may be looking at some real good, I think, alpha today, because we got two great guests, so it's going to be fun. My name is Paul Barron. Welcome back into TechPath. Joining me today, of course, is Hustle from over at Crypto Banter. You know him as Jonny over there. And also joining us is Kyle Wilson, who's both have been on the show many times. Kyle Wilson from Kyle Wilson on YouTube. So make sure and check those guys out there. But welcome to the show, guys.
Hey, it's good to be here today, Paul. Thanks for having me on.
Excellent.
Yeah, pleasure as always, Paul. I love joining every time. It's always quality conversations. And as you say, I think there'll be plenty of alpha to go around.
Yeah, let's get into a couple of things which really kind of roll into the offering that Meta is trying to put out there. And when you look at a couple of, I'll just run down some of the basic elements that everybody's probably interested in. Price point comes in at $14.99, $1,500. Release date, October 25th. And then a couple of things that's kind of interesting that they dropped was the app revenue was 1 in 3 apps are making $1 million plus, and 33 apps made $10 million. So this is pretty interesting. And then not to kind of follow that along, but you look at MetaQuest 2, they have sold over 15 million units worldwide. Okay, so with that in place, and you say, okay, there's a monster company, they dropped a monster product, and they seem to be somewhat NFT and maybe crypto friendly coming. There's a lot happening. Kyle, we'll start with you. First of all, what did you think about the overall presentation of what Meta tried to do yesterday?
Yeah, in terms of the headset, I think the tech was very interesting. I think it's quality, and I think what they're doing is pretty good in terms of the actual hardware. So kudos to them for doing that. But in terms of everything else, I think the feet got a little bit of backlash there. But overall, I would say that the hardware's great. Still, I'm not sure or if there's going to be any clarity on interoperability and how they plan to kind of integrate Web3 into their environment.
Yeah. Jonny, when you look at this, I mean, you've been studying Metaverse for a long time, and obviously this one for only really, I'm assuming, officially, they were probably working on it quite a while in 2021 and probably 2020 if you look back at just some of their acquisitions. But from a Metaverse standpoint, what they've been able to achieve in a short period of time, I mean, come on, this is one of the biggest companies in the world. They've got more developers than most people, there might be in the entire crypto industry as a whole. Should they have been further along on this, or do you think this is kind of what you expected?
I think that for sure, when you're looking at the landscape, people would want to rush them, right? They would want to see more. But I think, as Kyle alluded to, the hardware is by far, it's there. There's no dispute. They're the leader in the hardware industry of the metaverse. But on top of that, I think the willingness to show us what they're even showing us, knowing that it's not the final product, right? Like, I think from a consumer, we would hope it's not the final product. But I think as the producers, they're just kind of taking us along the journey of the development of the metaverse. I think that what they probably could do could be a lot more expansive. They're definitely the leader in the space, bar none. And it's exciting to just see the progression in general. I think some of the visuals did look a lot better than we had seen in the past, is one thing I will say, if we're just going to talk about the content perspective.
Yeah, we'll definitely get into that, because we're going to dive into the NFT ready avatars, all that good stuff for the audience. So we're going to kind of break this down into 3 parts. Really, the hardware side of it, what we're doing now, NFT ready avatars, how this affects the metaverse. Let's talk about further into the hardware side, because again, going into the metaverse, whether you've looked at anything from Red Fox, Zilliqa, go down the list, all right? There's been metaverse after metaverse. You guys, I know, get approached by probably 10 metaverse companies a week on where the future is going and all this. And then you look at what Meta did. I mean, they seem to be walking the walk. I was looking at their controllers, $300 for a controller with cameras, and that's got a processor and a stylus in it. obviously mixed reality, and then facial, and then full body tracking, all of that now in this device. So for me, I look at this and I think, wow, this could really play up against some of the best set-top boxes or console games out there in the space. How far do you think this will push it? And this for both of you guys, in terms of really making a statement when it comes to hardware connecting to the metaverse versus what we've seen in the past, primarily Web 2 gaming. Where do you guys think that goes?
Yeah, I'll maybe
go ahead.
Yeah, so in terms of what they're doing, I think they truly are pioneering both hardware and the software behind it. So in terms of what they're doing in that specific area, I think they're doing a wonderful job. So, but yeah, aside from that, it'll be interesting to see how they handle supply chains around like CPUs and how they can decrease the cost of actually buying one of these headsets, because $1,500 is quite a bit for consumers. So I do wonder how they're going to handle that issue.
We'll show a video toward the end about that, because they were trying to reference that. Jonny, when you look at that, you look at the framework, $1,500. You've got yes, there's a lot of games that could kind of transition over from MetaQuest 2. How do you think this plays out for them? Do you think this price tag is going to inhibit adoption, or do you think that we'll see the early adopters come and eventually pricing will come down and they'll subsidize with ads? What are your thoughts?
I'm gonna have to agree with the latter of what you alluded to there. I think that they're probably going to be able to get away with it for now with the audience that they have, very niche down VR, people who want those experiences. But I definitely think in the future they might have to do some sort of a pivot and get more people in. If they want this thing to be every single Facebook user using Meta and using MetaQuest, et cetera, in their headsets, then I think that they're going to really need to rethink the price point long term for sure.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how this is really going to affect, I guess the NFT market for sure, and what that may look like, especially with the activity we're seeing in the NFT market around Ape. I want to kind of touch on that a little bit today, but I want to jump over to a video that talks a little bit more in tune with, and it comes from the keynote itself, but they're going into the breakdown of the avatars themselves and the improvements they made. Let me play this video for you guys. Maybe we'll play that. All right, so they're giving me the triple lead in here. All right, so maybe we'll have a video here, but essentially it was, I love it when our tech words. One of the things, Jesus, sometimes, it just always happens. These things are fun. What they got into and what he was really talking about here was the whole issue of trying to bring in the lower body torso of within the avatars themselves. Do you think this is a big thing, or do you think this was something that, hey, not really? What do you think, Jonny?
I'm not sure. I think that, yeah, I don't think it's too big of a thing personally. I do think the avatar customization is super cool though. I really like where they're going with it, but I don't know that that's the part that I'm most excited about.
Yeah, I would agree there as well.
Okay, you knew that it was gonna kind of come down the I think the development cycle anyway. I just can't imagine that it would have gone that way. So enough of that craziness. I want to get in, and this video was kind of showing where they kind of reveal the legs, which I thought was a little bit corny in essence, and and kind of just showed a little bit about how they were trying to take it to this next level with development. However, there has been some development around where the future of this might go in more real life connections, and also more in a real life look from what your avatar might look like in the future. So this is a good start. I think it's a good, kind of the first evolution. Obviously, we've already seen this coming from game aspects. How far do you think this may take it into other metaverses, Jonny? Do you think other developers out there in the blockchain are going to kind of take notice and say, hey, maybe we need to do a little bit more in this lane and kind of follow Facebook's lead?
I think they'll definitely carve like a. It's like I think the industry is a ball of clay at the moment, right? So I don't think
Yeah.
anyone really has the perfect recipe. But I think as far as if you're thinking interoperability, if you're thinking avatar customization to that level and that scale, I think that definitely a model to at least you have to take a look at it, right? I mean, the amount of market research and dollars that they've put into this industry, it would almost be foolish to not at least take note of what they're doing. And then, like I said, form that clay ball as a developer, as a metaverse out there that wants to carve out in the future and compete with Meta and be able to find your own lane, but also function with that interoperable, standpoint.
Yeah, and I think the to your point, just the amount of development that's going to be needed. This is another thing that I question right now. We're going to do a video later in the week, but I want to ask you guys' opinion of this, and that is, when you look at the state of metaverse today, as it is, do you really think we are within reach of something real happening outside of the gaming sector that Meta has kind of showcased here? Jonny, we'll start with you. Do you think this is something that's really attainable, or are all of these projects within the crypto space just spinning their wheels? What are your thoughts?
Okay, great question. So I think in the short term they are. I think everyone's spinning wheels a little bit. I mean, obviously, I think Sandbox making fantastic strides. I think that what Decentraland has done to this point, although I don't find it the most enjoyable experience over like a Sandbox, for example, I think that it's still one of those staple projects that has done a lot to this point for the space. I think obviously Meta, but yeah, I think that the industry, this is a long leg industry. Like this is going to be a longevity, who's the survival of the fittest, right? Mm-hmm. Who can really carve out the metaverse in the scale of timeline that it's realistic, 8 to 10, maybe it's 2030 before we see like the metaverse in its full blown format. But I think that for sure, short term, there's a lot of the spinning the wheels going on. If you don't have a lot of resources, like the projects I named, like Meta, Sandbox, Decentraland, they have a ton of resources at this point now to be able to have bandwidth to build out things for years to come. But full blown scale of the metaverse, this is a multi-decade opportunity.
Yeah, and I think the point that Meta made yesterday was they really brought in some of the elements that at least show some of what the potential is. They were just showing on screen, some of the DressX application elements that we'll probably see more and more of within, and we've already talked about this many times. You guys, I know, have both talked about this. Kyle, when you look at that in terms of NFTs, do you think fashion or other utilities within, let's say, Meta's environment as it is today, do you think that has the early lead in terms of being adopted, at least from an NFT standpoint? Or if not, is there one area that you think might come under fast adoption for Meta?
No, I think that's a great assumption there. I think, fashion is going to play a key part in what Meta is doing. I also think Meta is going to try to control a little bit of that creative process and create their own NFT avatars and control as much of that process as possible so they can generate that bottom line for their platform. But I do see other companies kind of following in suit in that vein. Even Bob Iger, the former CEO of Disney, he's an advisor to genies, and I see them creating lots of different types of avatars as well, kind of preparing themselves for something like this. So I do see like fashion playing a big part in the metaverse, and that could be what kind of drives more of the mainstream type of user into a platform like Meta.
Yeah, we've been following DressX for a little bit. We had one of their guys, not the DressX team on, but one of their investor team on, talking about kind of what that future might look like from an NFT standpoint. Jonny, do you think there are any other areas, when it comes to NFTs, if you were looking at the chessboard and saying, okay, Meta made some pretty big drops yesterday. They released a lot of information. What could be in their roadmap, at least from an NFT standpoint, that you think would be the perfect next step for them?
For Meta specifically?
Yeah.
Obviously, okay, there's a lot of fits, I think. Like for Meta, in the social media game, I feel like there's a lot of ways you could incorporate NFTs into interactions and participation, right? People always talk about soul-bound tokens, like like going to events in the metaverse over time. Obviously, clothing. There's so many digital items. I think that throughout the metaverse could become this valuable entity. It's hard to judge now what would be their biggest pull. I think fashion's one thing that they're obviously going for, but I think the way that they're going to integrate it into the social application of interacting with people inside the metaverse, because that's what they're ultimately trying to do. They're trying to they're trying to get people from the real world to the digital world here. So I think that incentivizing people with those NFT experiences potentially inside the digital world for participation in things over time, kind of like event-based, tickets, loyalty stuff for being like a long-term like player or however they're going to term it. I could totally see that being a big incorporation, but like I said, it's hard to tell at this point for me.
They had a Zoom partnership, so that along with when you look at what's going on with Teams and where Microsoft is going, that future, what this might look like within the metaverse. Again, I think these are some obvious kind of gateways for them, but then you also had Unity and Unreal Engine support for third-party apps and games, which I think obviously will open up some really big opportunities within this platform in itself. How far do you guys think, with all these different partnerships and development aspects that they've got right now already built in, is this company catchable from any blockchain or crypto metaverse that's out there today? Kyle, we'll start with you. Is there anybody out there that you think could play into this as a potential competitor?
Yeah, that's tough to say at its current state. I would have to say no, just because Facebook has so much, obviously, money to play with. They have a lot of developers. They already have that branding behind them, and they, like as you mentioned, they have a Zoom integration. They have Microsoft Teams integrations. So it's going to be a challenge for these other metaverses to have those types of integrations. Decentraland has, kind of that social feel. There's another app, Spatial XR. They're really great in terms of social, but the real question is, how are they going to integrate other platforms into their ecosystem so that you don't have to maybe use Meta, or you can compete with Meta? And I just don't see that currently in the Web3 space.
Yeah, so Jonny, you mentioned Sandbox a little bit. So you feel that it might be more of a reverse, where all of the current platforms that are being built today may end up trying to look at some sort of partnership play to tag on to what Meta could be doing right now? Or do you think standalones are going to live continuously, whether you look at the gaming ecosystem from Gala tied in with Epic, and then you play in what's happening over at Sandbox or even over at Axie Infinity? How does this landscape phase out? Because I mean, in the console business, there were clear winners and losers. Where do you see that?
So I actually think, so this would be it would contrast what I just said, but I think this is my honest thought process here. When I look at what these games will become, Sandbox will just become like the Minecraft of the blockchain, in my opinion, years down the line. People will look back at it. There's going to be all these experiences and partnerships, but I don't know that it's not the future of the metaverse. I think we all I love Sandbox and everything they've done, and I'm still super bullish on Sandbox, for example, but I don't think that the current iteration of the product is the future of the metaverse, right? So I think that when I look at that perspective, I think they have the runway potentially to be one of the biggest games ever in Web3 on that Minecraft type of level. And I think that could be their future path in the industry. If they don't want to have to keep up, in a sense, keep up with what these big dollar corps like Meta, like probably Apple, even though Tim Cook was going against the metaverse last week, I think that they're ultimately going to move that way. Like those big corporations like that, these tech companies, Microsoft, Amazon, they're all coming, in my opinion, and it's going to be hard to compete from that standpoint. But I think they'll have their lane to own carve out in the meantime.
Well, it's also kind of like the gaming industry, because there's been, you had your Titan gaming studios, and then you had a lot of the indies that have done some really great stuff. And I think I look at that and kind of look at where crypto and metaverse crypto is today, blockchain. And I look at that and think, well, that's most likely going to be the indie houses that probably do some really cool innovation, and in fact, maybe actually bring certain traits to the metaverse that maybe even someone like Meta may not bring. So it'll be an interesting play on this. All right. So when you look at, I want to touch a little bit more on the NFT side of things. Meta avatar integration in third-party games. Let's talk about that, because this could be a big opportunity for a lot of different companies as well as projects coming out there within the space. Kyle, if you were looking at the overall, I know you're a VV Omi guy. How would you see VV playing into this at all? Or do you think they've got maybe something that could eventually play into where Meta is going?
Yeah, I think that Zuckerberg has plans to integrate NFTs in some way, and I think it's a perfect integration for a platform like VV, just because the terminology that they're using, digital collectibles, that was kind of coined by the VV community and team. And so when I look at that, I see Facebook and Meta using the same exact terminology. So I do think that is kind of a hand-in-hand fit, and that when you're talking about digital collectibles, it's easy for mainstream to kind of adopt that ideology versus, a more advanced NFT like, Bored Ape Yacht Club, for example, which has many types of different utilities there. So I do see, a use case like VV going hand in hand with Meta's platform.
Okay, with that being the case, Jonny, this is for you. You look at what Gensler and the SEC has just done with Yuga Labs. That kind of changes maybe the dynamic, even though I don't know that this is going to be something that the SEC is really ready for in terms of a fight. But how would that play out, do you think, if we do see regulatory pressure coming into the NFT space, with Meta actually in the development zone right now of building some NFT integrations?
Yeah, I think they're obviously going to steer clear, right? Meta won't roll anything out officially to their audience, I don't think, until these things are all hashed out like legally, and they have probably some of the best legal teams in the world, I would imagine. We know this from the movie The Social Network. All jokes aside, but I do think that long term, when you look at like that question, yeah, Meta has the advantage for sure, but I think go ahead.
I was just saying, which blockchain do you feel like would really kind of get the benefit of what they're doing right now? Would this be a Polygon play or others
Polygon,
out there?
Absolutely. Yeah. Meta's partnered with Polygon. I think that Polygon has the most runway to do all this with their Disney partnership with, they partnered up with Amazon AWS back a little while back. They just did the Starbucks loyalty program. They're the biggest real world application blockchain, in my opinion, at the moment inside the metaverse. And I think that what's happening with Yuga is all due to the ApeCoin, right? Yeah. And I think that, like I said, Meta will sit on their heels, let their legal team kind of see what happens there before, because it's all about whether it's a security or not. I think the airdrop is kind of what has them under speculation. And, Zuck's legal team's not going to let him rush anything out and then him be the one under investigation.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's going to be, which is good, because I think this is something that could also normalize what's happening in this space. If you get a big, giant that starts to kind of frame it and said, listen, we're going to get work that's, the framework here. And really, I mean, let's be honest here. Meta is all in on this. So from an aspect of lobbying, legal teams, they're prepared for what's coming, which is most likely going to be some regulatory components. But I feel like this is actually a good thing for crypto in general. The more, and we've talked about this on a couple other shows, we've got banks and institutions coming in different unique ways. But in the space of digital assets, especially around digital collectibles, as well as NFTs, the more of what Meta is doing that can seep out into the rest of the world as a true use case or a business case study may be the real question mark. Because I think a lot of times it's just the, it's just the lawmakers trying to figure out, well, how would this look like in a company that was doing it right? So that, I think, to your point, Jonny, is a really big one. We're going to talk about the metaverse side of this, because this gets into some pretty detailed stuff around Horizon Worlds, available now on all devices. And within that, and if you think about Horizon Worlds and kind of just what they were able to do in a short period of time and what the potential growth opportunity is for all of this, is there anything that you guys look at when you consider this around the aspect to compete with other, consoles, other gaming companies, other consoles. How close do you think Facebook, Meta, is to really turning on a real competitive engine here to some of the titans in the space? Jonny?
I think they're pretty far off, actually. I would say that that video game development probably isn't their niche. I think that tech, software, product, the hardware that they've acquired or produced over time, a little bit of both. I think that that's their real hay. And I think the Epic Games, the Activisions, they just have the years and years, like the Riot Games of experience in this industry, and like really cultivating gamer habits. Facebook's gaming was they have a streaming platform, which is all content creators. It's not anything that like Facebook does, for example. And then the games on their platform were just little free mini games back in the day, right? Mm-hmm. Farmville, Mafia Wars. So although they do have the biggest budget, they probably could outlast and build some crazy gaming studio. I do think the traditional gaming studios are still a little bit ahead of what Meta's doing from a game standpoint.
3D model applications. This was in Maya, integrated now into Horizon Worlds. So this is obviously going to give them better graphics. Again, this gets into a certain level of expectations here around what the rest of the gaming industry is watching right here kind of unfold. And also there's going to be some expectations from the users aspect. So all the games coming on to, the MetaQuest platform are going to have a certain level of expectation. Some of these in the MetaQuest 2, just some of the games that have already been out there, very advanced, super graphic in terms of just the quality and the levels. Who do you think comes out of what we know as the blockchain gaming industry that could leap to that level? Kyle, we'll start with you on that one.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of companies in Web3, is that what you're...
Any project that you like, whether it's somebody over at, maybe one of the games over at Gala, possibly something over at Vulcan Forge, anything that you think could really kind of leap to, you can kind of see some of the graphics here on screen right now. Anybody out there that kind of sticks out in your mind?
Yeah, so I would say more like at a studio level. I think studios are going to do well in Web3, and you look at Illuvium or even a platform like Gala Games or Myria, which I happen to work for. But so I could see games definitely doing well, but even studios doing better, just because they have that long-term mindset that this is this is not a sprint, but this is a long-term marathon. So there's a few games I have in mind out there. Phantom Galaxy is one of them, Illuvium. Imposters, there's a lot, Undead Blocks, and many other games I could see doing really well in the short term and the midterms as well.
Yeah. What about you, Jonny? Do you see anybody that could see a lead that could jump in there?
Yeah, I would agree with Kyle's sentiment there. I like the platforms like Gala, Vulcan Forged, Ultra, Myria. I think those are all very strong platforms, and I would agree with that wholeheartedly. I think Shrapnel, super exciting AAA first-person shooter on Avalanche's blockchain. They just released some gameplay, and their trailer looked phenomenal. I'm really bullish on what the Polygon game, Dr. Disrespect's game, Dead Drop. It's a vertical extraction shooter. I mean, his network alone is I think overall his social media is his 5 million plus audience, and he plays that game. And if he delivers on that game, it's ex Infinity Ward Call of Duty devs working on it. I think it has a ton of potential. It's on the Polygon chain. And then I'm really looking forward to Illuvium's open world experience. I believe it's called is it Overworld? I think that's what it's called.
Yeah.
That's I'm looking forward to the open world experience there, because I think that'll really open people's eyes to what they're doing at Illuvium.
All right, so games, partnerships, we've seen. They've also done some deals here now with Universal and theme parks. That could play into this, obviously, around what the connectivity is with bigger projects around Disney, etc. Now we start to encircle, how does NFTs and how do blockchain games maybe come into that ecosystem? Are you guys seeing anything in the space right now outside of Polygon, and their incubator partnership with Disney? Do you think anybody has the potential to maybe break into some? It may not necessarily be Universal or a theme park entity, but maybe a major IP out of Hollywood, a possible major IP on a gaming studio side of things, whether you look at DreamWorks or Blumhouse, someone like that. Any partnerships that you think could be coming out of the blockchain space that could kind of leap into the forefront here? Jonny, you want to pick that one?
I know that there's a lot of, so if people remember, we've talked about the music industry a lot here, and there's independent artists who have done drops. Like Tory Lanez sold 1 million copies of his album
Right.
in 90 or like 67 seconds or something like that. It was absolutely insane. Like no one goes like platinum on paper like that fast, but when you do it, and it shows the power of the decentralized community when people have an ownership stake in those things. Like I could totally see. We're seeing Warner Music already getting involved in the space. We're seeing, I think Bronze Studios from Hollywood is doing some stuff. Like there's a lot of interesting projects that are kind of testing the waters. We saw Ubisoft as kind of that first studio that was testing the waters in gaming.
Right.
Now Epic Games is allowing games on their platform. So definitely, I think we'll see those big movers come in and maybe drop one product. I think that's what all these companies are going to do, right? They're going to drop like a test product, see how it goes, and then they're going to do research on it and move on from there and see if it's a fit. So I totally see that occurring. Yeah.
Let's go into cloud gaming. Go ahead, pick it up right there, Kyle.
Oh, yeah. I was just going to say, to add to that, I kind of see what Disney is doing as well. They launched their accelerator program, a lot of Polygon projects, but we know that they're on Vivi. It seems like they've kind of used them to drop their NFTs as well. But I could see companies like Disney. You guys put up DreamWorks. They're working with Voxverse, so that could be an interesting platform where maybe that reaches more the younger demographic. But I do see some of these major brands, potentially penetrating mainstream, like Disney, even them rolling out experiences. I've been watching that kind of closely. Disney with their AR experiences and how that kind of goes hand in hand with platforms like Vivi. So I do see that pretty interesting. And of course, as you're showing on screen here, DreamWorks and the Voxverse, I do find that really interesting. And I do think that IP like Trolls could be very fun and imaginative and kind of penetrate mainstream there too as well.
Yeah, and I think the key here is going to be key partnerships. The uniqueness with blockchain, back to your point, Hustle, is the elements that we're going to see in the music artists that I think seem to be aggressively moving, and their speed to market is quite a bit different than that of a game. So the opportunities there for NFTs and obviously distribution are going to be pretty big. I'm just kind of curious whether or not Meta will start to integrate more of that kind of content into what they're trying to do, because obviously with the device, it changes a little bit of the dynamic around what that offering could look like. And overall, there's a couple of things I want to hit on before we leave Metaverse and ask you guys some final questions here. You look at cloud gaming and what Xbox is doing, cloud gaming now with Google, with the new Chromebook, which was just released here recently. The potential here for going into cloud gaming. This has a lot of good indicators of where blockchain gaming could go as well, since it is essentially cloud gaming, especially from a mobile aspect. Kyle, let's lead with you. Cloud gaming, within an ecosystem, something as dense as Microsoft, or even let's go over into Nintendo or others that are out there, and then you kind of layer in the ability of blockchain. Does this have a future, or do you feel like we're going to be stuck in the console days, or do you think cloud gaming is coming?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think cloud game is going to be inevitable long term. I think we'll see more and more of it pop up. I think initially they had troubles with some of the hardware and even the back end hardware at the server level, but I think they're starting to solve those solutions. And I think that cloud gaming does have a bright future in maybe the midterm, even long term, with companies like NVIDIA and many others. Google, of course, we know with the Stadia, and platforms like that, or consoles that have tried to tap into cloud gaming. So I think that could be an interesting, case for blockchain gaming itself. So I do think that cloud gaming is kind of inevitable.
I want to show a chart to you guys. This is the PS5 versus Xbox and Switch. And you can kind of see here the Nintendo is in the red, the Switch. PlayStation kind of, not necessarily, it's still growing, but plateauing. Xbox Series X and S also growing, but still a little bit plateauing. But the Nintendo, obviously the leader here, and the potential for this. Now that you have those in play, and everybody kind of knows what that market consists of, where do you think the price point has to be on Meta's device, on this new MetaQuest, for them to jump into this chart and really make a dent in the next 5 years? I'll start with you, Jonny.
So tough, because I don't know how much these things cost to make, and none of us do. But if they want to compete at that scale on something that not a lot of people have or have had in the past, most people have never had a VR device. Most people have had PlayStations or Nintendos or Xboxes. They know and trust those brands at this point. And they've used Facebook, but they haven't used a MetaQuest or any of these devices potentially in their lives. I don't know production costs, but $499 sure sounds good to me.
Price points. Well, you think about it. I mean, you're coming at it from a retail perspective, but yet you also understand gaming. You understand kind of the future of it. So you have to respect that to a certain extent if you're going to see mass adoption in this space. This also could be a scenario where they're trying to maybe gauge adoption and scale it based on the ability to eventually roll this out with some sort of subsidy through advertising, which then, at your point, could come into a much better price point. Kyle, this is Nintendo Switch is currently just under 5 million units away from outselling the lifetime Wii sales in the U.S. So they think they're going to pick up around 2 million. But again, it's starting to look at that. I mean, you're talking about some massive numbers here, and this is just U.S. monthly sales. So Switch versus Wii. So it's pretty much ready to take over the Wii, which is ironic that the Wii is leaving our vernacular, along with Stadia and others. But this just shows the cycle of how all this is going to go. I want to wrap up on you guys' viewpoints on Metaverse as a whole, because this is something we talk about a lot. The situation with the SEC going after ApeCoin, in essence, NFTs, and the value of Ape, obviously related to the NFTs themselves. And you look at some of the stalling projects out there, I won't name any of them, but we've seen a lot of projects really slow down in terms of not only releases, but also in terms of new innovation. Kyle, I'll start with you. Do you think the Metaverse is dead? Or do you feel like we are in a spot right now where there's just, the market is holding it down? Just your thought on that. Completely honest.
Yeah, so I don't think it's necessarily dead. I think the idea is much alive, and as long as people still carry that excitement, I still think that the metaverse is very much alive. I just think that, as we said earlier, it's screeching its wheels, and we're in a precarious, economic time, unprecedented times. And so I think a lot of these companies, platforms, are trying to navigate this kind of economic turmoil and trying to figure out a strategy forward to launch their own metaverses or experiences. So that's an interesting question though. But in terms of the SEC, it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. I do feel like they're right now they're just in that initial probe. It could be a win for the NFT space if nothing comes of that.
Yeah, I think you look at the potential adoption here. I think obviously with what Meta's doing is going to be interesting. Will it be the critical thing that helps kind of extend the potential for what Metaverse could be over the next 5 to 10 years? Because I think the question will be, how much damage has the blockchain business taken over this last 12 months? Some pretty heavy damage. I mean, we're starting to see a lot of people vacating the space. I'm starting to see a lot more developers on job boards that are now leaping to Web 2 projects, and Web 2 projects that are trying to make the leap into Web 3. Jonny, when you look at that and the scale, and I don't want to put you on the spot in terms of companies that you think might make the leap, but is there any sector that you think is destined, it's going to be safe, whether it is the top tier gaming, maybe it's the top tier integrations into NFTs for other use cases? What are your thoughts there?
Here's what I'll say, right? How many coins are there in crypto? Like 11,000 or something on CoinMarketCap or listed, right? So something like that. Now in the last year, how many of those are probably metaverse or gaming tags? So many, and that's just tokens or so many NFTs. So like what I would more so focus on is like, look big picture, look at the industry as a whole. Like games over time, Kyle and yourself would agree, they die. Like people aren't playing the same Call of Duty from 5 years ago as they are today. That's just like how it goes. That's why they have to release a new game every single year.
Sure.
Like people's attention spans are short, and these games and traditional games do go away. And I think that when you're looking at the big picture, Epic Games pouring $2 billion into the metaverse, their biggest IP product is obviously Fortnite. You're seeing everything that Meta is doing. You're seeing what all the partners that Polygon's bringing over to Web3, the influencers, like I said, like Dr. Disrespect. It's like smart money, right? When you're looking at investing, you want to follow like the smart money in the industry. And in the gaming side of things, all indicators and everyone that we talk to, this industry is ripe for destruction. And there's no better use case today for NFTs than NFT gaming assets. And I think that's in its purest form. So I definitely do see that we're in the ground roots of a really, really disruptive industry. And we sound crazy right now. And if we didn't sound crazy right now, then, we wouldn't be onto something.
Yeah, been there, done that. It's an interesting space right now, because you're right. I get a lot of pushback, because I talk to a lot of traditional investors who have been, they've been tracking the crypto space pretty heavily, and they started to dabble into collectibles, trying to understand NFTs to a certain aspect. The ape coin debacle that we're in now has really kind of, for the ones that I've talked to so far about it, they've kind of set back on their heels and say, wow, this could really change the dynamic of where all this is going. Because Yuga Labs is doing a lot within the gaming aspect of what that might look like, and Ape is going to be a big part of that. So again, still, they're one of the biggest guys out there in the space, and even they being challenged is going to be an interesting position for sure. I know we have I think we have a poll coming up. Yep, we've got a poll coming up, and then we're going to take a few questions here. Yeah, okay, let's see here. For question. All right, so most exciting Meta Connect reveal, MetaQuest Pro 29%, and then obviously major partnerships on Xbox and Unreal. That was the big one for everybody. 47%, so that's good. Yeah, I like that. Do we have questions coming in? Yeah. Okay, cool. All right, so we're going to get to a few of them, and I want to bring in a couple here. One from this is pretty common, but Omi as a hidden gem, and it will be discovered in the bull run. I know, Kyle, you're all in on this, so I'm not even going to ask that question to you. When it comes to it over on the other side with Jonny, your opinion of Omi making it in through, Omi Vivi making it in through the bull run, and do they become a star at that period?
Yeah, I know we've discussed this before in brief whenever it's come up, but I think they are just like, they're like a diamond in the rough. No one really talks about everything that they like strived and like accomplished at this point. I think that they're not going anywhere, and I think that absolutely it's something to keep on your radar for the future, because all of their partnerships and IP that they have, that's going to be powerful as time goes on.
Yeah, I want to bring up the word Zilliqa, and we've had our fun with Zilliqa here on this channel, both good and bad, but either one of you have an opinion on Zilliqa, where it's going, what they could be doing, could not be doing? Is this one of those projects that maybe came out too early with too much innovation and may not make the stretch?
I think the console that they announced is interesting.
Yeah.
The Web3 gaming console. Go ahead, Kyle.
Yeah, consoles, that's one of those tough industries. I think they'll have to have a little bit more penetration and network effect, and that's what I really like to look at is the network effect. They could be interesting. I got into them early on, but I just haven't followed too much of their development over time. But the console could be interesting. I would like to see some more network effect there, though.
Yeah, like how is that going to work on multiple blockchains and stuff? That's going to be super interesting to see. Like, does it just how does the wallet work inside your console? I'm really intrigued to see kind of like how that all plays out.
Yeah, they've also had some executive transitions. So I think, vision is always a very important thing with companies like this, because you kind of have to know and have that capability of looking around a corner and that's something that me personally, I just am not seeing enough out of them. I thought that the console side was a little bit thirsty, in my opinion, based on where the market is right now. But that's hey, no hate. Hill Dog comes in saying, "Hey, sandbox integration into Xbox or PlayStation. What's the likelihood? If you gave it a 1 to 10 right now, Jonny, what would you give it?"
I'm gonna sound like a freaking bull, but I would honestly say 9. I think that I'm very confident that this game will make it on traditional consoles. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
I think it'll make it to Xbox before it will make it to
Absolutely.
PlayStation. But I would agree with Jonny on the 9, almost a 10. I think we'll see more of those roll out on those traditional consoles.
Listen, if
especially
the market
something like
is
Sandbox, that there's no dispute the quality of it. Like they're proven at this point.
If the market is in at least a small recovery, and they drop that news, whoever's holding Xbox tokens, or excuse me, Sandbox tokens are going to be and Xbox and Microsoft stock, I think will both benefit from that. Crystal comes in saying, what about Meta and Seek? Because Seek has been a company that we've talked about before with Metaverse utility. There are some aspects to it. What are your thoughts about Seek VR jumping in and maybe making a partnership deal with Meta?
Yeah, I'm familiar with Seek. You'd have to fill me in on that one.
How about you, Jonny?
I think VR. That I don't know that Meta. I think Meta is trying to carve most of their own like
partnership
VR,
deals.
AR. Yeah, like VR AR. I don't know that would be in their immediate scope. Potentially, but I don't. I would say probably, in my opinion, I would guess no.
No. All right, let's go here with another one coming in from P1 MVP. Meta way ahead of the competitors, trading at 2018 prices. That's the other thing that I thought would get a little bit of pop. Obviously, we saw some pressure because of the anticipation of the CPI for stock, but Meta's down. Its stock is as low as it's been in many years. Do you think they can pull out? I mean, this is a very difficult time for Meta and the stockholders. Remember, Zuckerberg, even though he's got super shares, he still has to report to a board, kinda. But that has a fiduciary responsibility to the stockholders. And pricing wise, it's. Do you think it's a buy right now at under? Could it get down maybe into that? I dare say, if we saw some big pressure here, under $100.
I think if you're believing in the metaverse long term, then if there's like a couple of stocks that you have to pick through, Meta's definitely near the top of that stack. If you're betting on that, I think that with the stock market trending the way it is and the macro the way it is, aside from the midterm elections, I don't see much that's going to give it much relief now that the conference is behind it. So, long term, I think you have a long time to be able to, if you're interested in investing in Meta, I think you're going to potentially see better prices. Yeah, that would be my opinion.
Yeah, it's the long-term play. And again, we talk about this often on the channel, is that, most of the kind of investments that you guys are making today, they're not something that you're going to dispose of in the next year, maybe the next 2 or 3 years. You understand enough of how this market is rolling. So definitely a good one for sure. Let's get another one in here. This is really more about Apple, and I just cannot believe that Apple does not have a secret plan in place. I just cannot believe this. This would be the most disappointing thing in my tech career if I found out that Apple did not have a secret plan on all this. Kyle, what do you think what do you think Apple and Tim Cook's up to over there?
Yeah, they're betting big on augmented reality, and so I think they're going to go full on. They see Meta doing the VR and kind of mix, but I think Apple 100% is doing something behind the scenes, and we'll see a lot more hopefully news soon or in the next year or two. Exactly what that is. Obviously, they announced that the 30% fee, they want to collect that. I think there's something to that. I think them nodding to the NFT space, saying we are in this and we do want to adopt NFTs. I think that's a big statement. And I'm excited for the future of what Apple does. I mean, I'm not excited about the 30% fee per se, but it is a win still for the NFT space. So yeah, I definitely think Apple's up to something for sure.
Jonny, what do you think would be the one thing or two things that Apple could do that would just literally drop an atomic bomb in the space?
Yeah, I think obviously come out with their own competitor headset. I think that would be number
Okay.
one most
Probably
disruptive thing
cool
that they
looking
could pull.
glasses, something that was a little
Probably something
sexier.
super sleek. Yeah, not like
Yeah.
so bulky on your head. Like Apple
Yeah.
loves those innovative tech. Like that would be one thing. They've always cultivated the devices like no other. The iPads, the
Yeah.
phones, the Macs. There's no dispute on that. And I think number two is maybe their own just full blown immersive metaverse experience. Like I actually
Hmm.
think that Tim Cook's ideology, the last thing I would say on this, is flawed. I think the metaverse is an idea, is a concept. I think
Right.
VR and AR are the techs that play into it. So I
Mm-hmm.
actually think that there was a disconnect there when he said metaverse isn't the future. I just think he was maybe coming at Meta themselves when he said that.
Yeah,
More
he
than
did.
because yeah, that's my opinion.
Yeah, he did kind of diss on him for sure, in the essence. But I think that you have to in the framework. If you look at the big tech companies out there, whether it's Google, Meta, Facebook, and then obviously Apple. I still think Twitter is going to play a role in this. Obviously, with Elon getting involved, most likely more on a transactional level, but from big picture, immersive experiences, interoperability, possibly into blockchains, NFTs, tying into payments at some point down the future. I still think it's Facebook and Apple hasn't made or played a card yet. So I don't know if that worries me or scares me. I'm not sure which, because it could be one of those things that they just do something so innovative that it absolutely just destroys. I mean, you got to remember that's what happened in the phone business. They did something so innovative it absolutely destroyed the marketplace. I mean, BlackBerry just went away overnight.
And to what Jonny was saying earlier, is just digging at Meta a little bit. I do think that they'll have a product that's sleek, that does compete with what Meta's putting out, and I do think a sleeper would be Niantic, because they already have not in terms of VR but AR, they do have a leg up, and they have way more time in the trenches, so to speak. So I could see them doing something, but we'll see there. They're kind of like a sleeper, I would say, not like a main competitor to like Apple or Meta, though.
Yeah, for sure. Guys, it's always fun chopping it up with you guys. Thank you so much for both of your times today. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, pleasure as always, Paul.
You bet. All right, so you guys are tuned in over on the maybe on the podcast side of things right now. If you're catching all this, you missed all these great graphics and really kind of an insight to what Meta is doing and what this potentially could do in terms of the effect on not only the crypto markets, but also the gaming sector and what we'll see in the future from the NFT side of things. So a lot of that is really tuned in on, and all of that happens right here on the YouTube channel. All you have to do is jump over here, search out a few videos on Paul Barron Network. You'll find us. Make sure to like a couple of videos and then subscribe. If you're not part of the Diamond Circle, it's a very easy click down below. It gets you in free, gets you a couple of emails a week. And we also drop some Diamond Circle only content when we do a lot of alpha drops over there. So make sure and do that. We'll catch you next time. If you guys want to reach me, it's out on Twitter. We'll see you next time right here on TechPath.